clanmates chorused around him. Their eyes shone with enthusiasm and commitment, and Hawkwing felt that he was part of the strong Sky Clan that he remembered, not a ragtag band of cats who were scarcely better than rogues or loners. Hawkwing saw the relief that flooded into Leafstar's amber eye. Prologue. Sunlight poured into the gorge, bathing the sand-colored rocks in a warm glow. On either side, the walls plunged down sharply until they reached a narrow valley at their foot. In the depths, water cascaded from a black hole beneath a pile of boulders and became a stream that wound its way through the gorge until it was lost to sight among bushes and trees. A gentle breeze carried the enticing sense of prey. A powerful Tom, his pale gray fur patched with white, sat on top of the pile of boulders, gazing downstream. A frosty glimmer of starlight clung to his pelt, and stars shone in his blue eyes. After a while, the stillness of the gorge was broken as a brown tabby emerged gracefully over to the rocks, scrambling up until... "Brackenheart," the gray and white Tom meowed. "Have you thought any more about this vision?" "I have, Cloudstar," Brackenheart replied, dipping his head. "And I have no idea—" He broke off as a third cat appeared at the top of the gorge and came bounding down the trail to join the other two on top of the boulders. Stars flowed like water through his gray pelt and gave an icy glitter to his claws. Cloudstar rose to his paws. He and Brackenheart bowed their heads in profound respect. "Greetings, Skystar," Cloudstar mewed. Skystar returned the greeting with a brisk nod. "Well," he asked, "have you come to a decision?" Brackenheart shook his head, while Cloudstar looked troubled, replying, "No. What we have seen is too terrible. There are no easy answers." "But an answer must be found." Skystar stood up straighter and gave an impatient lash of his tail. "All three of us have seen the scourge that looms over SkyClan, a danger more dreadful than the heaviest, darkest storm cloud. It could black out the sky and put an end to the clan I've founded forever. I could not bear that." "SkyClan will never end." Cloudstar's blue eyes glittered fiercely. "We have suffered great losses before, only to rise and thrive again. When we were driven out of the forest so many seasons ago, we persevered. We found a home in the gorge, and even when the rats destroyed and scattered most of the clan, a few cats kept the memory alive until Firestar came to restore what had been lost." "But Firestar is dead," Brackenheart mewed. "The clan is far from here. He can do nothing for SkyClan now." Skystar looked thoughtful. "Then we must speak to SkyClan directly," he insisted. "They must be warned." "True, Skystar," Brackenheart responded. "And shall we give? What can we tell them to do?" "We must tell them to fight." Cloudstar mewed decisively. "They are strong, brave cats, deeply committed to one another as a clan. They..." Brackenheart let out a sigh. "But not even Firestar himself could fight this scourge. The battle is unwinnable." "Precisely. The time has come for SkyClan to leave their comfortable territory," Skystar declared. "What?" Cloudstar's eyes stretched wide in outrage. "After so many cats struggled to keep it? After so many cats died for it? You want them to just leave without putting up a fight?" "Everything comes to an end. Man has been its own island for too long." Skystar leaned forward, his brilliant blue eyes fixed intently on the other cats. "When I founded SkyClan, it was one of the 5 petals of the blazing star, and all of the clans thrived because they worked together. SkyClan must take a lesson from its history." Cloudstar gave the ancient leader a puzzled look. "Clan is meant to leave the gorge?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. Leaving the gorge will only be the first paw step on a much longer journey." No! Cloudstar's neck fur began to bristle. My clan and I had... Firestar risked his life to reunite us after we were driven out the first time. And now you suggest throwing all that away? Have you got bees? Brackenheart nodded in vigorous agreement. I was SkyClan's last medicine cat before rats drove us out of... How can you expect me to stand by and watch as my clan is driven out a second time? Skystar listened impassively to Cloudstar's heated outburst and Brackenheart's desperate protest. His voice was quiet and steady as he replied. No. Every cat knows what our clan has suffered. But there is a time for our claws to grip hard to what we own, and a time to let go. The threat SkyClan faces is just the beginning. Only by joining with the other clans can they clear the sky. Brackenheart drew in a wondering breath. All 5 clans together again. Then he gave his pelt a shake. But how can this be? Where will SkyClan live if they rejoin the other clans? There is only so much territory. How do we know that the other clans will accept them peacefully? How do we know that the cats of SkyClan will want to join the others? They have only ever known Firestar, and he is in his own star clan now. And Sandstorm, Cloudstar reminded him. Skystar nodded. Yes, and she is a brave cat, but her path is dark to me. It is to Firestar. For when fire dies down, there are still sparks that remain. And you are right that SkyClan's path will be long and difficult. That is why they must start now. He paused, staring into the distance. They must find those sparks, or their future is terrible indeed. Chapter 1. Hawkpaw let out a drowsy purr, enjoying the sensation of warm sunlight on his pelt. He lay curled up at the base of a rock, his dark gray tail wrapped over his paws. His whiskers twitched as he sank deeper into sleep, imagining himself stalking prey among the bushes at the top of the gorge. Meow! Hawkpaw startled awake as a bundle of ginger sharply in the ribs. He breathed. Get off me! Hawkpaw yowled, pushing Duskpaw away as he sat up and shook out his ruffled fur. What's gotten into you? I was enjoying my nap. Well, it's time to wake up, lazy bones, Duskpaw meowed. Cloudpaw and Pebblepaw and I have come up with the best plan ever. Still half asleep, Hawkpaw narrowed his eyes in annoyance. What is it this time? Duskpaw is always bugging me with some amazing plan, and usually it's, hey, we're going to steal some two-leg food. Since he was a kit, Duskpaw had loved the taste of two-leg prey, and was often willing to do some very silly things to get it. Honestly, Hawkpaw thought, twitching his whiskers, I think he must have bees in his brain. Okay, then, Hawkpaw murmured, then stretched his jaws in a massive yawn. What's this great plan? Pebblepaw saw some two-legs carrying woven twigs to the two-leg green place, Duskpaw explained, bouncing up and down on his paws, his eyes rounded with excitement. And you know what that means, right? Hawkpaw gave a weary sigh. I saw this coming. Two-leg food. At the same moment, Duskpaw let out an excited squeal. Two-leg food! It's been a while since Pebblepaw saw them, he continued. They must be long gone, but their leftovers will still be there. I think you're going to turn into a two-leg if you're not careful, Hawkpaw teased, grinning. Your fur will get thin, except on top of your head. It'll be all puffed up and messy, and you'll start walking on your hind legs and riding about in monsters. Don't be a stupid furball, Duskpaw protested. Like that would ever happen. You're so crazy about their food, and it's not even that exciting, Hawkpaw responded. Besides, how do you plan on getting away without Wasp Whisker finding out? Not to mention Billy, Storm, and Plumwillow. They won't like their apprentices sneaking off without permission. Ebony Claw would rip my pelt off if I was idiotic enough to join you. They won't find out, Duskpaw mewed with a dismissive wave of his tail. All the warriors have stuffed themselves with fresh kill, and now they're snoozing at the bottom of the rock pile, just like you were a moment ago. We're going straight there and we'll be right back, before our mentors even wake up to miss us." Hawkpaw noticed that his sister, Cloudpaw, and the speckled white she-cat, Pebblepaw, were standing a few tail lengths away, just out of earshot. Pebblepaw was scraping impatiently at the ground, clearly tired of waiting for Duskpaw.
"Get a move on,"
she spat.
"Let Hawkpaw stay here if he's too much of a scaredy mouse."
Hawkpaw growled deep in his throat at the insult. "Like I'd go if she's going." "Look, I know you don't like her," Duskpaw meowed, lowering his voice and casting a quick glance between Hawkpaw and Pebblepaw. "But you should get to know her better. You know, the two of you are a lot alike. You're both as difficult as a fox in a fit. So are you coming or not?" Hawkpaw let out an irritated hiss at the thought that he was anything like Pebblepaw. She had to be the most annoying cat in the whole clan. She struts around like she's so great, when she's just an apprentice like the rest of us. "No thanks," he snapped. "Just leave me alone, okay?" "Keep your fur on," Duskpaw protested. "Your temper will get you into trouble one day." That made Hawkpaw even more angry, being scolded by the brother who spent so much time messing around. "No, you're the one who'll get into trouble for sneaking out to steal two-leg food." Duskpaw shrugged, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "It's worth it. Two-leg food is delicious, but you can suit yourself. We're going." "Fine," he huffed. "Have fun. And good luck explaining when you get back." Hawkpaw let his annoyance ebb as he watched his brother scuttle off with Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw. He yawned, reflecting thankfully that at least his other sister, Blossompaw, had the good sense not to get involved. Curling up again, he wrapped his tail over his nose and closed his eyes. Maybe now I can finish my nap in peace. Some time later, a stiff breeze rustled the branches of the trees at the top of the gorge as Hawkpaw followed the paw steps of his mentor, Ebonyclaw, through the undergrowth along the SkyClan border. The sun was dipping down below the topmost branches. Hawkpaw fluffed out his pelt against the sudden chill. Ebonyclaw's lithe black figure halted, and she glanced at Hawkpaw over her shoulder. "Wait here while I renew the scent." Hawkpaw did as he was told. He wondered what had happened to Duskpaw and the others. They hadn't returned from their expedition by the time he and Ebonyclaw had left camp. Probably they were so excited by the food that they lost track of time, mouse brains. A secret thrill crept through Hawkpaw at the thought of Duskpaw getting into trouble. He's always fooling around and bending the rules. I love him, but he needs to get serious if he wants to be a warrior. It didn't seem all that fair to Hawkpaw that he always worked as hard as he possibly could, but Duskpaw kept getting away with his stupid behavior. Maybe if he has to deal with the elders' tics for a few days, he'll decide to make more of an effort. When Ebonyclaw returned from setting the scent marker, she was sniffing the air, a suspicious expression on her face. "Can you smell that?" she asked. Hawkpaw opened his jaws to taste the air, and an unfamiliar scent flowed into his mouth. "Great StarClan! What is that?" he exclaimed. "I don't know." Hawkpaw blinked in surprise. "Everything, even if she is just a daylight warrior." "Do you think there's some new kind of animal near the gorge?" he asked, trying not to let his voice quiver with the sudden apprehension he felt. "There could be," Ebonyclaw replied. "I've picked up this scent once or twice before, near the place where my two legs put their rubbish, but this is the first time I've caught it on our territory." "What are we going to do?" Ebonyclaw's ears twitched. "Nothing for now. You can't fight a scent. But we'll report it to Leaf Star and tell all the others to be on the lookout for a strange animal. You never know. It might not be dangerous. Stinking like that, it can't be good." Hawkpaw was drawing in more of the tainted air, trying to commit the scent to memory, when he noticed another smell, something strange and bitter, that made his nose wrinkle. Glancing at Ebonyclaw, he saw that she had her ears perked up and her nose stuck in the air. "What's that? Another animal?" he asked. Ebony Claw shook her head.
I think it's fire, but I hope it isn't.
She sniffed the air again.
It must be coming from the two-leg place. They're such mouse brains, they always like to start fires to stick their food into. We should go check it out to make sure they have it under control. Follow me.
Anxiety fluttered in Hawkpaw's belly like a whole nestful of birds.
That's where Duskpaw and the others went. Will they still be there? Surely they would have left by now, right?
Hawkpaw had never seen fire before, but he had heard enough stories from the elders to know that it could be a serious threat.
Will it reach the camp?
He asked, patting alongside Ebony Claw as her paws turned purposefully toward the two-leg place.
Probably not,
Ebony Claw reassured him.
The two-leg place is quite strong, so it's best to make sure that we'll all be safe.
As they emerged from the bushes, Ebony Claw picked up the pace until she and Hawkpaw were racing across the stretch of dry grass that separated their territory from the two-leg place. The scent grew stronger with every paw step, and Hawkpaw's flutter of fear grew stronger too.
I really hope Duskpaw has gone back to camp.
To his surprise, Hawkpaw spotted movement in the grass and realized that small creatures, mice and shrews, were pelting through the stems toward them, away from the source of the smell. One mouse practically ran into his paws, then veered away at the last moment. Hawkpaw's jaws watered.
Hey, look, Ebony Claw, he mewed. Easy prey. There'll be time for hunting later,
Ebony Claw told him, racing on without a pause.
Right now we have to make sure that everything's safe for our clan.
As they drew close to the two-leg green place, the air grew thick with a gray swirl that billowed around the two cats. The acrid scent was overwhelming, catching Hawkpaw in the throat so that he had to cough.
Stay back,
Ebony Claw warned him. At the heart of the gray swirl, Hawkpaw could just make out a red glow that began to grow as he watched it, reaching up into separate licking tongues. He stared at the scarlet flames as they spat out gray puffs of air. They seemed to be feeding like some greedy animal on a kind of two-leg rock made from flat sticks. Hawkpaw had sometimes seen two-legs sitting on it with their kits, eating the weird food Duskpaw was so crazy about. Now the fire blazed up, cracking low-hanging branches of a tree.
Duskpaw, Cloudpaw,
he thought, gazing around in terror as he looked for his littermates. But there was no sign of them.
They must have left by now,
Hawkpaw reminded himself.
I wish I could leave too.
The gray air was making his eyes sting, and his lungs burned with every breath he took.
Ebony Claw, can we?
He began. Suddenly the gray air swirled again. The wind shifted, blowing harder from the two-leg place. The fire surged, and the low-hanging tree branches burst into flame. For a few heartbeats they blazed. Then with a loud crackle, the lowest branch fell right next to the burning two-leg rock. Ebony Claw let out a gasp and pushed Hawkpaw back. Every muscle in Hawkpaw's body tensed. He had never heard a warrior sound so terrified before, let alone his own mentor. But Ebony Claw's gasp was instantly drowned out by the sound of terrified yowling from beneath the two-leg rock. It was hard to hear over the rushing and crackling sounds of the fire, but the yowling sounded dreadfully familiar to Hawkpaw.
StarClan, no! There are apprentices in there!
Ebony Claw screeched.
Oh no!
Hawkpaw felt as if his belly was dropping out. His littermates were
Cloudpaw!
Stay back! Ebony Claw snapped, then raced toward the fire and smoke, her belly fur brushing the grass and her tail streaming out behind her. Hawkpaw crouched, staring at her, his claws digging hard into the ground. The shrieking came again, louder than before, and now he could make out separate voices.
Duskpaw, Cloudpaw, and Pebblepaw are all in there!
Ignoring Ebony Claw's order, Hawkpaw sprang forward and hurled himself toward the blaze.
I'm coming!
He yowled. As the smoke thickened around him, Hawkpaw found it hard to see what was going on. The gray tendrils stung his eyes and caught him in the throat. Coughing, he groped his way forward until he spotted Cloudpaw trapped between the burning branch and the two-leg rock. A heartbeat later, he managed to make a strange rock, while Duskpaw scrabbled on the ground at the far side of the blazing branch.
Guilt flowed over Hawkpaw, hotter than the flames. I wanted Duskpaw to get into trouble, just a bit, but not for something like this to happen. Then Ebony Claw appeared through the smoke, fighting her way to Cloudpaw's side. Hawkpaw froze for a moment. Do I try to help Duskpaw or Pebblepaw? Pebblepaw seemed to be in more danger. Flames had burned through parts of the two-leg rock, and pieces were starting to fall off. Pebblepaw cringed away from them, letting out a wail of terror. Beyond her, Duskpaw was still scrabbling around as if he was trying to get to Pebblepaw. He yowled something. Hawkpaw couldn't hear the words through the roaring of the fire, but when he saw his brother turn his head, he understood. He wants me to help Pebblepaw. It did look like Pebblepaw was in more danger, but Duskpaw was his kin. I wish I could ask Ebony Claw for advice, but she's busy saving Cloudpaw. Hawkpaw thought it had been more than a few heartbeats before he flung himself through the flames toward Pebblepaw. All his instincts were telling him to run for safety in the other direction. Burning grass scorched his paws, and hot sparks landed on his pelt, but he kept going until he reached Pebblepaw and grabbed her by her scruff.
This way, Furball,
he growled through a mouthful of her fur as he dragged her away from the fire and onto a clear patch of grass. Ebony Claw approached as Hawkpaw let Pebblepaw flop to the ground, pushing Cloudpaw in front of her. But where's Duskpaw? Hawkpaw couldn't understand why his brother hadn't followed them out of the blaze. Peering through the smoke, Hawkpaw saw that Duskpaw was still where he had been, next to the burning branch. But now he was slumped over, unmoving. A chill of terror gripped Hawkpaw.
Duskpaw!
He yowled. With Ebony Claw at his side, Hawkpaw raced back through the smoke and flames. When they drew closer, Hawkpaw saw that one of his brother's paws was trapped underneath the thicker end of the branch, where the fire still hadn't reached. For a moment, he felt his heart stop, and he couldn't take a breath. Duskpaw wasn't telling me to save Pebblepaw. He was asking me to help him. Together, Hawkpaw and Ebony Claw thrust at the branch with their forepaws until it rolled off Duskpaw in a billowing cloud of sparks. Then Ebony Claw grabbed him by his scruff and dragged him out to where they had left Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw. Hawkpaw followed, pushing his littermate from behind. Duskpaw's legs were limp and his head lolled. He didn't seem able to help himself. Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw still lay slumped on the ground, coughing and letting out whimpers of pain. Hawkpaw could see that patches of their fur were scorched, giving off a strong scent of burning. But to his relief, neither of them seemed to have life-threatening injuries. However, Duskpaw was hardly moving. Now and again he would feebly try to lift his head and let out a weak cough, but then he would slip back into unconsciousness. Hawkpaw gazed at him in horror and shook his shoulder with one paw.
Duskpaw! Duskpaw, wake up!
He begged. What were the three of you doing out here? Ebony Claw demanded. Cloudpaw let out a mournful wail.
Duskpaw said we should sneak over here and look for scraps of two-leg food.
Hawkpaw couldn't take his eyes off his unconscious littermate. And I might have been with you if I hadn't said no. He remembered his earlier hope that Duskpaw would get into trouble with a shudder of shame. Ebony Claw didn't seem to notice. She lashed her tail at Cloudpaw, clearly frustrated. If Duskpaw told you to jump off the cliff, would you do it?
I know it was our fault, too,
Cloudpaw whimpered.
But when we got here, the fire was just over there in that shiny thing.
She pointed with one paw. The trash can, yes, Ebony Claw meowed. And you didn't have the sense to go back to camp and report it?
It seemed safe enough then,
Pebblepaw continued the story.
Duskpaw said that the fire must have driven the two-legs away, because two-legs are scared of everything, but we were brave enough, and we shouldn't let the fire keep us from the best scraps of tasty food. There was stuff under there.
Cloudpaw pointed at the two-leg rock, now collapsing into a smoldering heap.
But then the wind shifted and the two-leg rock caught fire, and then the branch fell and trapped us. We never should have listened to Duskpaw,
she finished with another miserable wail. You should have thought of that sooner, Ebony Claw snapped. It's too late to feel sorry, and we need to get Duskpaw back to camp so Echo Song and Frecklewish can help him. She flattened herself on the ground beside Duskpaw. Hawkpaw, help me to get him onto my back, she directed. Hawkpaw worked his shoulders under Duskpaw and began to lift him onto the Black She-Cat's back. Duskpaw revived a little and hooked his claws into Ebony Claw's fur. When he was settled, Ebony Claw staggered to her paws and set off slowly back toward camp, with Hawkpaw steadying his brother on one side and Cloudpaw and Pebblepaw limping behind. As they left the two-leg green place, they heard two-leg monsters screeching in the distance, the sound growing closer as the cats trekked across the stretch of grass and into the bushes at the top of the gorge. Gazing anxiously at his brother, Hawkpaw could hardly believe what had happened.
"Hang in there, Duskpaw,"
he whispered, but now Duskpaw's eyes were completely closed, and he didn't respond at all to Hawkpaw's urging. His legs were hanging limply, and he had lost his grip on Ebony Claw's fur. Hawkpaw could barely manage to steady him and keep him on the black she-cat's back. Hawkpaw felt as if all his strength had leaked out through his paws, and there was a hard knot in his belly, as if he had swallowed crow food. He was sick with guilt. He couldn't believe he'd wished that Duskpaw would get into trouble. Even worse, he could have saved Duskpaw from the fire, but he hadn't.
"Did I make the wrong choice saving Pebblepaw first?"
he asked himself.
"And what if I lose Duskpaw because of it?"
Chapter 2. Helping Ebony Claw carry Duskpaw down the narrow trail into the gorge was one of the hardest things Hawkpaw had ever done. He was terrified that his brother would slip off Ebony Claw's back and plummet down onto the rocks below, in spite of the black she-cat's careful paw steps and his own desperate efforts to hold Duskpaw still. His heart was pounding and his legs trembling by the time they reached the bottom. Already several cats were clustered at the end of the trail, gazing anxiously upward. The smell of smoke drifted on the air. Hawkpaw guessed that his clanmates were already aware that something was wrong. Duskpaw was completely unconscious when Ebony Claw let him slide from her back. Hawkpaw couldn't stop sign of life. He almost expected his brother to wake up and bounce to his paws, explaining that it had all been a joke. "Duskpaw is always fooling around." "What happened?" Wasp Whisker thrust his way through the gathering crowd and gazed down at his motionless apprentice, deep concern in his eyes. Billy Storm, Pebblepaw's mentor, was hard on his paws. "Pebblepaw?" His voice was stern. "Where have you been?" Pebblepaw's head was bowed in shame, and it was Ebony Claw who replied. "There's no time to explain now. Some cat fetch Echo Song and Frecklewish quickly." Billy Storm turned and left, as more cats bounded up to see what was happening. Hawkpaw looked around for his mother and father. He spotted Sandy Nose and Sage Nose, followed almost at once by Tiny Cloud and Fire Fern, but there was no sign of Cherry Tail or Sharp Claw. Every cat was quiet, exchanging dismayed glances.
"They know this is bad,"
Hawkpaw thought.
"Really bad."
Moons seemed to pass before Echo Song and Frecklewish slipped through the crowd to reach Duskpaw's side.
"Thanks, Star Clan,"
Hawkpaw murmured to himself. "There's a fire at the two-leg green place," Ebony Claw meowed, before either Medicine Cat could ask a question. "There was so much smoke. Duskpaw breathed in most of it, because he was the last to be saved. We almost lost Pebblepaw, too, but Hawkpaw managed to get her out." Echo Song gave a brisk nod. "Frecklewish, go and get some wet moss and some comfrey and honey to treat the burns," she ordered. As Frecklewish dashed off, she added, "Ebony Claw, Hawkpaw, lay Duskpaw out on his back." It took all of Hawkpaw's courage to help his mentor arrange Duskpaw's limp body on the ground. He could barely look at his brother. He seemed so lifeless. Instead, he forced himself to look at Echo Song as she pounced on Duskpaw and began to press his chest rhythmically with her forepaws. From time to time, she would stop to breathe into Duskpaw's mouth from her own. Hawkpaw stared at her face, trying to glean information from her expression. Maybe this was something that looked very bad, but was no big deal to an experienced medicine cat. But all Hawkpaw could tell from gazing at Echo Song was that she seemed gravely serious, intent on her task. Duskpaw still wasn't moving.
"What's happening?"
Hawkpaw asked at last, unable to stifle the agonized question. Ebony Claw touched his shoulder with her tail tip. "Echo Song is trying to restart Duskpaw's breathing and his heart," she explained.
"Which means his breathing and his heart have stopped,"
Hawkpaw realized. He felt again as though a tough piece of crow food was lodged in his belly, and he was about to vomit it up. Echo Song went on pushing at Duskpaw's chest, while Hawkpaw watched, barely daring to breathe. Finally, after what seemed like moons, the medicine cat stopped and stepped back, shaking her head. Duskpaw still lay motionless.
"You can't give up,"
Hawkpaw cried.
"What are you doing? You have to save him!"
He was aware of all the other cats who were gathered around, staring at him, but no cat spoke. Hawkpaw felt his heart tearing apart, as if a badger were ripping it with powerful claws. He let out a mournful wail, and behind him another cat joined in. Turning, Hawkpaw saw his mother, Cherrytail, along with his father, Sharpclaw, pressing forward into the circle of cats who surrounded him. Cherrytail rushed forward and flung herself to the ground beside Duskpaw, burying her nose in his fur. A couple of tail lengths away, Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw were lying on the grass, moaning miserably. Hawkpaw guessed they were beginning to feel the effects of their burns, but they could barely open their eyes. Clearly they weren't aware of what was going on around them.
"They don't know yet that Duskpaw is dead."
Sharpclaw stood over his son's body, stony and silent. Then briefly Hawkpaw felt his father's gaze rest on him. But before either cat could speak, Billy Storm reappeared with the clan leader, Leafstar. They joined Sharpclaw and Ebonyclaw, and all four cats conferred quietly together. Hawkpaw crept up to his mother and pressed himself closely against her side. He couldn't find any words to comfort her, but he wrapped his tail around her shoulders. Cherrytail didn't respond, her muzzle still buried in her dead son's fur. Hawkpaw didn't blame her for not letting him console her. He couldn't console himself.
"I can't tell her it'll be okay. Nothing will ever be okay again."
By now, Frecklewish had returned with wet moss and the healing honey and comfrey. Echo Song joined her, and the two medicine cats began to dress Cloudpaw's and Pebblepaw's injuries. After a few moments, Frecklewish padded over to Hawkpaw with a bundle of dripping moss in her jaws.
"You have a bad burn on your back,"
she mewed, setting down the moss.
"Keep still and I'll dress it."
Hawkpaw turned to her with the beginnings of a snarl. He hadn't realized that he had been hurt. He still couldn't feel it. All the pain he felt was in his heart.
"I'm okay,"
he meowed to Frecklewish. "Leave me alone."
"No, you're not okay,"
Frecklewish persisted.
"You need to let me—"
Hawkpaw sprang to his paws.
"I said leave me alone!"
he growled with a lash of his tail. At that, Frecklewish backed off, turning to see to Ebonyclaw's wounds instead. Echo Song was still tending to Cloudpaw and Pebblepaw. Pebblepaw's parents, Sparrowpelt and Tinycloud, along with her littermate, Parsleypaw, had settled down beside her and were trying to comfort her. His mother to see that Sharpclaw had joined her and was gently licking her ears. His green eyes were full of staring at his brother. At last, Cherrytail rose to her paws and padded over to Hawkpaw, leaning against him.
"Ebonyclaw told us what happened,"
she murmured.
"I'm glad that you're okay. I know you did everything you could to save Duskpaw. It's not your fault that he's dead." "But
Hawkpaw tried to interrupt, knowing very well that it was his fault.
"You're a hero for saving Pebblepaw,"
his mother assured him.
"It was very brave of you to rush into that fire."
Hawkpaw couldn't feel any sense of pride at his mother's words, and when he looked up at his father and saw Sharpclaw's face so full of grief, guilt rushed over him again so strongly that he could hardly stay on his paws. Pain had begun to stab into Hawkpaw from the wound on his back, and he wished that he hadn't told Frecklewish to go away.
But then, maybe I deserved this pain. "Hawkpaw!"
The voice was Echo Song's as she padded toward him.
"Come back with me to the medicine cat den. You need to rest, and let me see to that wound on your back."
Hawkpaw opened his jaws, but Echo Song gave him no chance to protest. Though she was usually very calm, he knew that she put up with no nonsense from any cat.
"You'll do as you're told,"
she meowed.
"You're just an apprentice, and I'm your medicine cat. When I tell you to come with me, you come.
Too exhausted and heartsick to argue, Hawkpaw bowed his head and followed her. Inside the medicine cat den, Pebblepaw and Cloudpaw were already stretched out asleep in nests of thick moss. Their chests rose and fell rhythmically as they breathed.
"How are they?"
Hawkpaw asked. Replied.
"They'll be okay. Their burns aren't as bad as I thought at first. In a few days, they'll be up and about again."
Hawkpaw's relief at hearing Echo Song's reassurance was mingled with even more guilt. Knowing that Pebblepaw wasn't badly hurt reminded him of what he couldn't stop thinking.
What if I had gone to save Duskpaw first? Maybe Pebblepaw's paw would still be alive.
After a moment, Hawkpaw became aware that Echo Song was watching him, her green eyes full of understanding, as if she could read his mind. Then she turned and took a poppy seed from the rock shelf where she stored her herbs.
"Eat this,"
she mewed, setting it in front of Hawkpaw.
"It will calm you down, and you have to let me dress the burn on your back."
Hawkpaw wanted to give in. The wound felt small, but it hurt worse than anything he had felt in his life, a clawing pain that made him feel sick.
"No,"
he decided.
"I don't deserve to feel better."
He began to back away from Echo Song, but his body was giving way at last from his injuries and the smoke he had breathed in. He felt his legs buckle and a cloud seemed to swirl around him, blacker than the smoke. As he began to slide into unconsciousness, he felt Echo Song's gentle paws spread something soothing on his back. The medicine cat's voice pulsed in his ears, saying something about a prophecy, but Hawkpaw couldn't make out the words, and in a moment the sound was swamped in his own desperate cry.
"I should have saved him first!"
His voice echoed in his own ears, as he finally drifted into a painful, fitful sleep. Hawkpaw scrambled to the top of the gorge and slipped into the long grass. The sun had cleared the tops of the trees, but shadows still lay among the rocks and in the undergrowth, and no cat had noticed him leaving the camp. Several days had passed since the fire. The scent of smoke had faded from Hawkpaw's fur, and he could hardly feel the pain of his burn anymore. The vigil for Duskpaw was over, but the tightness and he couldn't forget how he had failed to save his brother.
"Leaf Star will make me a warrior today," he thought. "I should be excited, but I'm not. I feel as if nothing good will ever happen again."
His heart was so heavy he could barely carry it. Hawkpaw slid through the bushes until he reached the foot of the tree where Duskpaw had been buried. As he stood over the mound of earth, a wave of guilt and sorrow swept over him. "You shouldn't be there, beneath the dirt," he mewed aloud. He remembered how lively and mischievous his brother had been, and silent, with soil clotting in his ginger fur.
"You should be here with me. About
the days since Duskpaw died, every cat had kept on telling him how brave he had been to rescue Pebblepaw. But Hawkpaw didn't want to hear that, because it only reminded him of how he hadn't rescued his brother. Not in time, anyway. Hawkpaw stood beside his brother's grave, his head bowed, until he heard Leaf Star's voice rising from the gorge, faint with the distance, but still ringing out clearly.
"Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey join here beneath the rock pile for a clan meeting."
"Goodbye, Duskpaw," Hawkpaw murmured.
"I'll never forget you, and I'll never forget.
I'm so sorry." Then he turned and headed back to the gorge. By the time Hawkpaw had clambered down the trail, the rest beside the water that cascaded endlessly out of the black hole beneath the boulders. Leaf Star stood on top of the rocks with her deputy, Sharpclaw, beside her. Blossompaw and Cloudpaw emerged to stand at the front of the crowd of cats, their expressions a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Their mentors, Bouncefire and Plumwillow, followed and halted just behind them, and as Hawkwind, Ebonyclaw slipped into her place with the others.
"Cats of Sky Clan, Today we have gathered together for one of the most important events in the life of a clan.
Raised proudly.
The making of new warriors. Plum Willow, Bounce Fire, Ebony Claw. Of a warrior. And do they understand the importance of the warrior code in the life of a clan? Cloudpaw has worked hard to understand all that,
Plum Willow responded. Bounce Fire gave a brisk nod. So has Blossom Paw.
And Hawkpaw,
Ebony Claw added. Hawkpaw's heart lurched.
Yes, I worked hard, but what good was that to Duskpaw? I don't deserve this.
Leaf Star dipped her head approvingly and leaped down from the rock pile to stand in front of the three apprentices. Beckoning with her tail, she summoned Cloudpaw to her.
Cloudpaw stepped forward shakily.
She was recovering well from her injuries. She still hadn't built up all her strength, and it was hard for her to stand for long. He forced himself. That Cloudpaw was grieving for their littermate too, and to focus on what was happening.
This is one of the most important moments of Cloudpaw's life. I don't want to miss it.
Repeated the words that clan leaders had used for season upon season, every time an apprentice was made into a warrior since the first clan.
Leaf Star, leader of Sky Clan, call upon my warrior ancestors to look down on this apprentice. She has trained hard to understand the ways of your noble code, and I commend her to you as a warrior in her turn.
Turning to Cloudpaw, meeting her gaze directly, she continued,
Cloudpaw, do you promise to uphold the warrior code and to protect and defend this clan, even at the cost of your life?
Hawkpaw's heart lurched again as he heard the phrase, at the cost of your life.
Duskpaw never got the chance to take this oath,
he reflected.
He never got the honor of losing his life to protect his clan. Instead, he lost it trying to get a few scraps of two-leg food. Somehow that makes it worse, and Cloudpaw must be thinking the same thing.
Cloudpaw looked up at her clan leader, pausing for a moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was fervent as she replied,
I do.
Then by the powers of StarClan,
Leaf Star went on,
I give you your warrior name. Cloudpaw, from this moment you will be known as Cloud Mist. StarClan honors your courage and your resilience, and we welcome you as a full warrior of SkyClan.
Leaf Star rested her muzzle on the top of Cloud Mist's head, and Cloud Mist licked her shoulder in response.
Cloud Mist! Cloud Mist!
The SkyClan cats yowled, greeting the warrior with her new name.
Leaf Star waited for the noise to die down, then touched Cloud Mist's shoulder with the tip of her tail. Because of your injuries, she meowed, you need not sit vigil tonight. You still belong in the medicine cat den until you have finished recovering.
As every cat murmured agreement, Cloud Mist dipped her head and moved back to sit with her. A proud lick. Next, Leaf Star beckoned Blossom Paw to stand in front of her. Hawkpaw listened, given the name of Blossom Heart.
StarClan honors your courage and fighting skill. We welcome you as a full warrior of SkyClan. Blossom Heart! Blossom Heart!
Looking proud and happy, Blossom Heart licked her clan leader's shoulder and withdrew to stand with her clanmates. Nervousness tingled through Hawkpaw, briefly overcoming even his sorrow for Duskpaw, as he realized that now it was his turn. It wasn't only because every cat's gaze would be on him as he went through the ceremony, but he was suddenly aware that a massive change was hovering over his life, like an eagle about to swoop on its prey. He wasn't a kit anymore, and the prospect of taking his place in his clan as a full warrior was as overwhelming as if the cascade of water from beneath the rock pile had caught him and swept him away.
I wish Duskpaw could see this, he thought. He always had a joke to make. I wonder what he would say if he were here now.
But Hawkpaw couldn't begin to imagine that, because Duskpaw wasn't there. He was under a pile of earth.
He'll never be here again.
Hawkpaw knew that being a warrior wouldn't be any fun without his littermate.
Hawkpaw padded forward to stand in front of Leaf Star. She greeted him with a dip of her head and called on StarClan to look down on him. Then she turned and asked him to take the oath. Hawkpaw, do you promise to uphold the warrior code and to protect and defend this clan, even at the cost of your life? Everything that was in Hawkpaw, his guilt and grief for his brother's death, his determination to honor his memory by becoming the best warrior that he could, surged into his voice as he replied, I do! Then by the powers of StarClan, Leafstar continued, I give you your warrior name. Hawkpaw, from this moment you will be known as Hawkwing. StarClan honors your courage and your bravery, and we welcome you as a full warrior of SkyClan. Hawkwing thought, aren't they sort of the same thing? He wondered whether Leafstar thought that there was only one good thing about him. As the clan acclaimed him by his new name, Hawkwing felt his pelt prickle under some cat's gaze and spotted Sharpclaw staring at him. Ever since dusk cold, and though he had never said as much, Hawkwing knew that his father blamed him just as he blamed himself. He raised his head to look directly at Sharpclaw and knew that he was thinking of Duskpaw, too. Duskpaw, who would never have another but dead. Cherrytail padded over to the three new warriors, nuzzling each of them in turn. Congratulations, she meowed. I'm so proud of you. But Hawkpaw felt his mother's eyes, and when Sharpclaw leaped down from the rock pile to join them, he stood by silently.
Hey, Hawkwing!
At the sound of his name. It was the first time any cat had really used the new name. Then he turned, and his heart grew cold as he saw that the cat speaking was Pebblepaw. Really spoken to her. He could hardly stand to look at her. She's always so cocky and arrogant and pleased with herself. Then he realized that she seemed different now from how she had been before the fire. Since then, she hasn't made a single snarky remark to me.
I want to thank you for rescuing me,
she meowed, a look of genuine gratitude in her eyes.
I was trapped, and you saved my life. What Leafstar said about you is true. You really are brave and courageous. I'm so happy to be alive, and it's all because of you.
He noticed that she still had a poultice of honey and comfrey on one of her paws, but apart from that, she looked as strong and healthy as ever. She's doing much better than Cloud Mist. Somehow the realization made anger throb through Hawkwing from ears to tail tip. He tried to choke out, "You're welcome," because he knew that was what he was supposed to say. But his throat felt as if it was full of ash, and his anger rose until he felt it must burst out of him. How dare she stand there looking so healthy and happy when my brother is dead? Hawkwing didn't feel proud of his warrior name anymore. He didn't even feel sad about Duskpaw. Everything within him had been overwhelmed by his fury. "I wish I hadn't saved you," he blurted out. "I wish I'd gone for my brother first. Then maybe he'd still be alive." The gratitude in Pebblepaw's face drained away, and her eyes widened in dismay. For a moment she looked crushed. Then her gaze hardened. Her head and stalked away. Chapter 4. Some time before, and the red glow in the sky told Hawkwing that the sun had risen, though its rays had not yet cleared the top of the gorge. Shivering, he shook out his pelt and rose to his paws to arch his back in a long stretch. The night of his vigil was almost over. His sister, Blossomheart, a few tail lengths away, had started to groom herself, licking one paw and passing it over her face. After a moment she paused and parted her jaws in a massive yawn.
"I could sleep for a moon,"
she whispered.
Not supposed to speak to each other, but on the night before when they started their vigil, Hawkwing had been unable to resist murmuring a few words into his sister's ear.
I miss Duskpaw so much. I wish he could be keeping vigil with us.
I miss him too,
Blossomheart had responded. After that, there was nothing to do but keep watch for invaders, and since no invaders appeared, night to sit and think. Now, as the red sun peeked over the rim of the gorge, he was beginning to feel guilty about the way he had treated Pebblepaw. The thought of her still filled him with despair and anger, but now he began to wonder if it was unfair to blame her for the decision he had made and the way he felt now. It was my choice, he told himself, my responsibility. Even so, his guilt over exploding at her was only one drop in the vast pool of guilt that was his heart. As the whole circle of the sun appeared above the cliff, warriors began to emerge from their den, stretching before making their slow way down the trails. Leafstar appeared from her den and beckoned some of her cats around her, speaking quickly. I wonder what all that's about, Hawkwing. A moment later, the group dispersed, the warriors heading more purposefully to the bottom of the gorge. Sandy Nose broke from the group and walked up to Hawkwing and Blossomheart.
Your vigil is over, the light brown Tom announced. Come and join the others by the rock pile. Leafstar is calling a clan meeting.
Another one? Hawkwing was puzzled. Why? We all just met yesterday for the warrior ceremony. The rest of the clan began to gather around as Leafstar leaped up to the top of the rock pile. She was followed by Sharpclaw, and also, Hawkwing noticed with a prickle of curiosity.
Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey join here beneath the rock pile for a clan meeting,
Leafstar yelled. Out of their den, then hurried down the trail to join their clanmates. Harvey Moon, MacGyver, and Ebony Claw, the daylight warriors, leaped from rock to rock to gather with
early,
Hawkwing and Blossomheart. We might have missed this. Birdwing appeared at the entrance to the nursery with Mintfur and Honeytail, all three she-cats looking down at their leader on the rock pile. Birdwing's kits frisked around her paws, sometimes getting perilously close to the edge of the trail until their mother gathered them closer with a sweep of her tail. Pebblepaw and Parsleypaw poked their heads curiously out of the apprentice's den, then bounded down to the bottom of the gorge and found a place to sit close to the edge of the river. Finally, the Dawn Patrol, Tiny Cloud, Sparrowpelt, and Bellapaw returned, appearing at the far side of the gorge and making their way down into the crowd of cats. When all the clan was assembled, Leafstar began to speak, her amber gaze traveling over her cats. Hawkwing thought that he could detect trouble in her eyes, and his pads pricked with apprehension.
Echo Song received a prophecy from StarClan a few sunrises ago,
the brown and cream-colored she-cat meowed.
It will affect the whole future of our clan. I have thought deeply about this, and I feel that it is time to share her vision with you.
She took a step back and waved her tail as a sign for Echo Song to speak. The silver tabby medicine cat hesitated, her gaze seeming fixed on something far away. Then she gave her pelt a brisk shake.
In cave, to speak with the spirits of our warrior ancestors, she began. A pale gray Tom appeared to me in a dream. I had never seen him before, but he told me that his name was Skystar, and he was the ancient founder of our clan.
Hawkwing caught his breath. How many seasons must have passed since SkyClan first came to be, and yet a clan leader could still appear out of the far past to speak to their medicine cat?
Skystar told me, the fire has burned out, but to dispel the darkness, you must find the spark that remains,
Echo Song meowed. And what does that mean? Sharpclaw asked with an irritated twitch of his tail.
I believe that the fire that has burned out must refer to Firestar, the great leader of ThunderClan,
Echo Song responded. Firestar, who restored SkyClan after we were scattered and almost destroyed? Hawkwing thought, his one Ravenpaw's friend? Every kid knows that story.
The concern in Leaf Star's expression grew deeper. I don't want to believe that Firestar is dead, she murmured. Echo Song dipped her head sadly. I don't see what else Skystar's words could mean, she continued. And if that's true, then the spark that remains could well be Firestar's kin in ThunderClan. That must mean that we're being told to seek out ThunderClan, and perhaps the other clans too. Perhaps it's time for SkyClan to go home.
Sharpclaw lashed his tail. Hawkwing could see how much he hated Echo Song's suggestion.
And just how do you suggest we do that? We know that the clans have moved away from where they lived when Firestar came to us. How are we supposed to find them now?
Echo Song remained calm in the face of the deputy's objection.
I doubt StarClan would send us on a journey we could not complete, she mewed. We can seek out Barley, the farm cat who is Ravenpaw's friend, and ask him if he knows where the clan's camps are now.
That's exactly what we should do,
Bellapaw called out from where she sat at the foot of the rock pile.
Barley will be glad to help,
her brother Rileypaw agreed. They're Barley's kin, Hawkwing thought. They know him better than any cat. But even if he can help us, is this really what we're being asked to do? Silence fell among the clan, the cats exchanging glances of mingled confusion and dismay. Hawkwing felt as bewildered as his clanmates. StarClan can't possibly mean to send us wandering away from here. The gorge is our home. Why would we want to leave it? Leaf Star had stepped forward again and was about to speak when the silence was broken by Sage Nose.
This is all very well, he declared, but surely there is a simpler answer. This prophecy must be about the fire that just happened. It can't be a coincidence that the fire broke out at the same time that Echo Song had her vision.
Maybe there's something left over at the two-leg green place where the fire happened,
Plumwillow suggested.
Maybe Skystar
shook her head.
Day that the fire happened, but...
Was StarClan predicting the fire?
Nettlesplash asked, leaping to his paws. Hawkwing felt as though a rock had plummeted out of an empty sky and landed on top of him. Sharpclaw let out a low growl. Quiet down, all of you, and let Echo Song finish. The clan obeyed him, though there was still a stir of movement and muttered comments following Nettlesplash's question. Hawkwing felt the tightness in his chest. Did Echo Song know about the fire before it happened, and she kept it to herself? He tensed every muscle as though he was creeping up on prey as he listened to.
I believe that the fire has burned out refers to...
Echo Song meowed.
I don't think that Skystar...
This time it was Tiny Cloud who interrupted.
If this prophecy... Maybe it refers to Fire Fern or Bounce Fire.
Bounce Fire puffed his chest out at the thought of being mentioned in a prophecy, while Fire Fern, looking disturbed, opened her jaws to reply. But Hawkwing couldn't hold himself in any longer. Before Fire Fern could speak, he sprang to his paws.
If you knew about the prophecy,
he cried out to Echo Song,
why didn't you warn any cat? You think it's just a coincidence that you received this prophecy on the morning of the great... Make any sense? StarClan warned you about the fire, and... StarClan has always worked in mysterious ways,
Echo Song cut in.
By the time I awoke from the dream, it was already too late. When I came out of the Whispering Cave, I could smell smoke, and by the time the smoke reached our camp, the fire was already blazing. It was only moments later that you and the others returned with Duskpaw. Hawkwing, believe me, I understand how you feel, but not even a medicine cat can go back in time.
Her words had no more effect on Hawkwing than the cawing of rooks high in the branches of a tree.
That's unfair. Why would StarClan send a prophecy too late for Echo Song to do anything? Duskpaw needn't have died. What's the point of having prophecies if they can't prevent anything terrible?
He asked bitterly. Echo Song's voice grew gentle, and her beautiful eyes were full of compassion.
Hawkwing, I'm really sorry about what happened to your brother. It is a terrible tragedy. But this prophecy is not about him. How can it not be about him?
Hawkwing demanded, his heart pounding as if it would break out of his chest. Laws,
He wanted to leap on Echo Song as if she were his enemy, and if she had not been standing above him on the rock pile, he might have done it.
The prophecy spoke of a fire, and Duskpaw died in one. Sharpclaw stepped forward and gazed down at his son. Echo Song is our medicine cat. She deserves your respect. His sharp tones made Hawkwing feel embarrassed. He was too old to be scolded like that in front of the entire clan. He said no more. He could barely speak. His whole body seemed to burn with shame and anger.
Prophecies can't prevent every terrible thing,
Echo Song explained.
But terrible things. And if StarClan tells us that we must find Firestar's kin, then it's up to SkyClan to listen. Or who knows what might happen.
Her words fell into silence. Every cat in the clan had their gaze trained on her.
Finally, Leafstar raised her tail and spoke into the silence. I will consider sending a few cats on a quest to look for Firestar's kin, she announced. But before that, a patrol will go to the scene of the fire just in case there's anything in the embers.
And what if there's nothing to be found? Sharpclaw asked.
Then we will be sure that Echo Song's prophecy did not refer to the real fire, Leafstar responded. Sandynose, you will lead the patrol. Take Plumwillow and Hawkwing with you.
For the patrol, surely Leafstar must be furious with me. Then he realized that his clan leader must want him of all cats to be certain that there was nothing important at the scene of the fire, and that the prophecy had nothing to do with Duskpaw's death. To disperse, Sandynose and Plumwillow came to join Hawkwing.
You haven't eaten or slept,
Sandynose meowed as he padded up.
We don't have to go right now, if you want some fresh kill and then take a nap.
No, I'm fine. Hawkwing's paws were itching to get moving. If we need to find the spark that remains, who is to say it won't blow away soon? How do we know it hasn't blown away already?
Okay.
Sandynose gave a brisk nod and led the way up the trail to the top of the gorge.
As he followed, Hawkwing realized part of the reason why he had been so hostile to Echo Song.
About the fire. Then it wouldn't be all my fault that Duskpaw died, because it would have been destined in the stars. But he realized, too, that even if that was true, it made no difference. Duskpaw is still dead.
I think the prophecy...
Alright guys, well, I'm gonna end this stream now. So yeah, if anybody's watching, thanks for watching.